The amber liquid in the wine glass caught the light from the crystal chandelier overhead, refracting into tiny prisms that danced across the white tablecloth. I'd been staring at it for 3 seconds too long, the kind of pause that would get me reprimanded if Marcel noticed. But my feet were screaming, a hot stabbing pain that started in my arches and radiated up through my calves with each step across the marble floor of Lumière, the French restaurant where I'd worked for 3 years. 3 years of 12-hour shifts. 3 years of memorizing wine pairings I'd never taste and describing dishes I couldn't afford to eat. 3 years of being invisible while serving people who spent more on a single meal than I made in a week. My hand trembled slightly as I set down the glass, the Bordeaux leaving a thin red ring on the inside that caught the light. The tremor wasn't from the weight of the bottle, though the 2009 Chateau Margaux was heavy enough to make my wrist ache. It was from the exhaustion that lived in my bones now, the kind that sleep couldn't touch, and from something else, something I'd been trying not to think about for the past 6 days. The home pregnancy test, still wrapped in a paper bag, hidden beneath my spare uniform in my locker downstairs. I hadn't taken it yet. If I didn't take it, I could pretend the missed period was stress. The nausea was bad food. The way my breasts felt tender and swollen in my uniform bra was just hormones. Schrödinger's baby, simultaneously existing and not existing until I opened that box and collapsed the possibility into a single, life-altering truth. Ren. Marcel's sharp whisper cut through my thoughts, his French accent making my name sound like a reprimand. Table 7. They've been waiting. Table 7, the private alcove in the back corner, separated from the main dining room by burgundy velvet curtains. The table we reserved for VIPs, celebrities, politicians, the kind of people who valued discretion as much as they valued the truffle risotto. On my way, I murmured, checking my reflection in the antique mirror near the kitchen doors. My blonde hair was still secured in its neat bun, though a few strands had escaped to frame my face. The black dress uniform fit perfectly, cinched at the waist with a white apron that emphasized a figure I'd worked hard to maintain through years of walking miles each shift and eating whatever the kitchen would give us for free. My face looked pale under the warm lighting, dark circles beneath my green eyes that no amount of concealer could fully hide. I looked tired. I looked poor. I looked exactly like what I was, a 27-year-old woman treading water in a city designed to drown people like me. I pushed through the kitchen doors, the familiar chaos washing over me. The hiss of gas burners, the clatter of pans, Chef Antoine's rapid-fire French as he dressed down a line cook who'd oversalted the beurre blanc. The heat was oppressive, making my uniform stick to my back, but I barely noticed anymore. This was my world, this liminal space between the kitchen's honest sweat and the dining room's elegant pretense. Camilla, the other waitress on shift, brushed past me carrying a tray of appetizers, her dark eyes meeting mine briefly. She looked even more exhausted than usual, her lipstick slightly smudged, a tiny run in her stockings that she'd tried to stop with clear nail polish. We'd become friends over the years, bonding over shared misery and stolen moments, smoking cigarettes in the alley during breaks. But lately, something had changed in her. She flinched when Marcel raised his voice. She volunteered for the late shifts, the ones that ended at 2 a.m. when the last drunken businessman finally stumbled out. She'd stopped talking about her little sister back in Guatemala, the one she sent money to every month, keeping her voice low when she took phone calls during breaks. 3 weeks ago, I'd found her crying in the employee bathroom, mascara running down her cheeks, her hands shaking as she tried to reapply her makeup. When I'd asked what was wrong, she'd just shaken her head, whispering that I couldn't understand, that I shouldn't ask questions, that some debts couldn't be paid with money. I should have pressed harder. I should have made her tell me. But I'd been drowning in my own problems, barely keeping my head above water, and I'd told myself it was respect for her privacy, when really it was cowardice. Now, watching her disappear into the dining room with that tray balanced on her palm, I felt the familiar guilt twist in my stomach. Whatever was happening to Camilla, it was getting worse, and I had no idea how to help her. I grabbed the leather-bound menu from the station near the wine cellar, running my thumb over the embossed gold lettering. Lumiere. Light. What a cruel irony for a place that felt so dark once you got past the chandeliers and the flowers and the carefully curated ambiance. The walk to table 7 felt longer than usual, each step a small agony in my worn ballet flats. I'd need to replace them soon, but that would mean $40 I didn't have. $40 that could go toward my overdue electric bill, or the prescription I'd been putting off filling, or the test still wrapped in paper in my locker, waiting to confirm or deny the secret growing inside me. The velvet curtains whispered as I pushed through them, entering the private alcove. The lighting was dimmer here, more intimate, candles flickering on the table casting shadows that danced across the walls. 3 men sat around the table, their suits expensive enough that I could probably estimate their net worth just from the fabric. Armani, Zegna, something bespoke that cost more than I made in 6 months. But it was the man at the head of the table who made me stop breathing. He was younger than the others, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, full lips set in a line that suggested he smiled rarely and meant it even less. His shirt was black, open at the collar just enough to reveal the edge of what might have been a tattoo, and his eyes. His eyes were the color of slate before a storm, cold and calculating as they swept the room with the kind of awareness that came from expecting danger at every moment. They landed on me, and I felt pinned in place, a butterfly on a collector's board. I'd seen dangerous men before. The city was full of them, Wall Street types with cocaine habits and wandering hands, hedge fund managers who treated waitresses like furniture they could lean against. But this was different. This man didn't just look dangerous, he looked like danger itself, compressed into human form, barely contained by expensive clothes and social convention. "Good evening, gentlemen," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Welcome to Lumiere. My name is Ren, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." The older men barely glanced at me, too engaged in their whispered conversation. But the man at the head of the table continued to stare, his gaze moving slowly from my face down to my hands, still clutching the menu like a shield. Something flickered in his expression, too quick to read, before his features settled back into that mask of cold indifference. "What do you recommend?" His voice was low, rough around the edges like gravel in velvet, with an accent I couldn't quite place. New York, definitely, but deeper, older, from neighborhoods where English wasn't always the first language. "The wine list is extensive," I said, opening the menu to show them. "We have an excellent selection of French and Italian vintages. The sommelier can make recommendations based on your preferences." "I don't care about the wine," he said, and the other men went quiet, their conversation dying mid-sentence. "I want to know what you recommend. You've worked here how long?" 3 years. The answer came automatically, though something in his tone made me wary. 3 years. He repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them. "And in 3 years, you've learned what exactly? How to smile at men who don't see you. How to pretend you enjoy serving people who think you're beneath them." The other men shifted uncomfortably, but neither of them said anything. Whatever hierarchy existed at this table, it was clear who held the power. "I've learned," I said carefully, "how to do my job well, which includes recommending the Chateau Margaux if you prefer bold reds, or the Meursault if you're starting with the oysters." Something that might have been respect crossed his face, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Bring us the Margaux, the 2009, and whatever your chef recommends for 5 courses. "Of course." I made a note on my pad, grateful for the excuse to look away from those storm cloud eyes. "Any dietary restrictions?" "No." He waved a hand dismissively. "Surprise us." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the curtain. Ren. The way he said my name like he was testing its weight made something cold slide down my spine. That's an unusual name. It's just a name, I said without turning around. No, he said softly. Names are never just names. They're declarations of what someone hopes you'll become. A wren is a small bird, fragile, easy to crush. I looked back at him then, meeting his gaze directly. A wren, I said, is also clever, resourceful, survives in environments that kill larger birds. For the first time he smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator who'd just realized his prey had teeth. Good, he said. I'd hate to think you were helpless. I escaped through the curtains, my heart hammering against my ribs. Something about that exchange felt wrong, charged with meaning I couldn't decode. Men flirted with me all the time, made inappropriate comments, pushed boundaries. I'd learned to deflect it with professional grace, to smile and ignore and forget as soon as the shift ended. But this wasn't flirting. This was something else entirely. Something that made my instincts scream warnings I didn't fully understand. I put in their order, my hands moving through the familiar motions while my mind raced. When I returned with the wine, the conversation at the table had shifted. The men were leaning in close, voices pitched too low for me to hear, papers spread across the tablecloth. The man at the head, the one who'd asked my name, tracked my movements as I poured the wine, his gaze heavy enough to feel. I served the first course, warm oysters with champagne butter, then the second, a delicate fish course with microgreens and caviar. Each time I approached the table, the conversation would pause, resume only after I'd left. On my fourth trip, as I was clearing the fish course, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. One of the papers on the table had slipped, revealing what looked like photographs underneath. From my angle, I could only see one clearly. A woman's face. Young, maybe early 20s, eyes wide with what looked like fear. And in the corner of that photograph, just barely visible, was Camilla's distinctive silver bracelet, the one her grandmother had given her, that she never took off, that I'd complimented 100 times. My hand faltered, the plate I was holding making the slightest clink against another. It was enough. The man at the head of the table looked up at me, and in that moment, I saw him see my recognition. Saw him watch the realization dawn on my face. Saw the exact second he understood that I'd seen too much. "Thank you, Ren," he said pleasantly, but his eyes promised something else entirely. "That will be all for now." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and fled back to the kitchen. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the plates as I set them in the dirty dish station. Camilla. Whatever was happening to her, these men were involved. And I'd just shown them I knew it. The rest of the shift passed in a fog of mounting dread. I moved through the familiar choreography of service, smiling at guests, pouring wine, reciting specials with practiced enthusiasm, while my mind kept circling back to that photograph, to Camilla's bracelet, to the cold calculation in the man's eyes when he'd realized I'd seen it. By the time Table 7 finally left, somewhere past midnight, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. The lighting had been dim. The photograph had been at an angle. Maybe it wasn't even Camilla's bracelet. Maybe I was just exhausted and paranoid, projecting my own anxieties onto innocent business documents. But then I saw Camilla in the changing room, and I knew I hadn't imagined anything. She was sitting on the bench in front of her locker, still in her uniform, staring at nothing. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white with tension. When I entered, she didn't look up. "Cam?" I said softly, sitting down beside her. "Are you okay?" She laughed, a brittle sound that had nothing to do with humor, Am I okay? No, Ren. I'm not okay. I haven't been okay for months. Something in her voice, the raw desperation, the resignation made me brave. Tell me what's happening. Please. Whatever it is, maybe I can help. She finally looked at me, and the emptiness in her dark eyes was worse than tears. You can't help me. Nobody can. I'm in too deep, and there's no way out except... Except what? She shook her head, standing abruptly and opening her locker. She pulled out her purse, a cheap knockoff that she'd bought from a street vendor, and for a moment I thought she was just going to leave. But then she turned back to me, and there was something fierce in her expression, desperate and determined. When Marcel hired me 3 years ago, she said quietly, I was so grateful. I needed the money for my sister's schooling back in Guatemala. My whole family, we pooled everything we had to get me here, to give me this chance. I was going to save up, bring them over legally, do it right. I know, I said, because she'd told me this story before, in happier times when we'd shared cigarettes and dreams in the alley. But it wasn't enough, she continued. The money I made here, after rent and food and everything else, there was barely anything left to send home. And my sister, she got sick, needed surgery. $30,000 I didn't have, couldn't borrow, couldn't make in time. My stomach twisted, understanding dawning before she even said the words. Monsieur Laurent offered to help me. Her voice was flat now, drained of emotion. Our generous owner. He said he'd loan me the money, interest-free, as long as I did him some favors. Small things at first. Deliver messages to his friends, entertain certain guests, smile at the right people. Camila, I breathed, horror washing over me. It was fine at first, she said. Uncomfortable, but manageable. Just dinners, conversations. But then the favors got bigger, more intimate. And when I said I wanted to stop, that I'd find another way to pay him back, he showed me the photographs. Me with his clients. Me in compromising situations. He said if I refused, he'd send them to immigration, get me deported. And then who would pay for my sister's medical bills? Who would support my family? The room felt too small, too hot, the walls pressing in. So you've been prostituting myself, she finished brutally. Let's call it what it is. Laurent runs an escort service on the side, high-end, very discreet. He uses the restaurant as a front, recruits girls who are desperate enough or scared enough to say yes. Most of us are immigrants, undocumented or barely legal. Easy to control, easy to dispose of if we cause problems. I wanted to tell her to go to the police, to report Laurent, to fight back. But I'd lived in New York long enough to know how this would play out. A documented immigrant with photographs and powerful clients versus Laurent, a French citizen with money and connections, and lawyers who'd bury her in legal fees she couldn't afford. She'd be deported before the case even went to trial. Her family left with nothing. Tonight, Camilla said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. One of Laurent's clients wanted something I wasn't willing to give. I said no. He didn't like that. When I tried to leave, he grabbed me and... She pulled down the collar of her uniform slightly, revealing finger-shaped bruises blooming purple against her collarbone. Laurent's personal driver stopped it before it went too far. But Laurent was furious, not at his client, at me, for refusing, for causing a scene. Jesus Christ, I breathed. He told me I have one more chance. Camilla's hands were shaking now, and she pressed them flat against her thighs to still them. One more opportunity to prove I'm worth keeping around. Tomorrow night there's a private party. Very exclusive. Very expensive. If I perform well, he'll forgive the incident. If I don't. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. There has to be something we can do, I said desperately. Someone we can tell. Who? Camilla asked simply. The police Laurent plays golf with? The mayor who eats here every Tuesday? The judges who bring their mistresses to our private rooms? Laurent has spent years building connections, buying influence. He's untouchable. She was right, and we both knew it. Men like Laurent didn't exist in a vacuum. They thrived because the system protected them, because people with power valued their comfort and privacy over the suffering of invisible women serving their meals. Camilla closed her locker and squared her shoulders, and I saw her physically transform, putting on the mask she wore for customers. Pleasant, professional, empty. I have to go. Laurent wants to brief me on tomorrow's party. Make sure I know exactly what's expected. Cam. Don't, she said, holding up a hand. Don't try to fix this. Don't put yourself at risk for me. Just forget I said anything, okay? Forget everything. She left before I could argue, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell as she climbed up to Laurent's office on the 3rd floor. I sat alone in the changing room, my mind racing, rage and helplessness warring inside me. I couldn't forget. I couldn't pretend I didn't know. But I also couldn't see any way to help her that wouldn't make things worse, that wouldn't put her in even more danger. Unless an idea began to form, crazy and desperate, and probably doomed to fail. But it was something. It was better than nothing. I opened my locker and pulled out my phone, the outdated model I'd been using for 2 years because I couldn't afford an upgrade. I opened the browser and started researching, fingers flying across the cracked screen. QR codes, how to create them, how to embed information, how to make them look legitimate while hiding something else underneath. It took me 3 hours, huddled in the empty changing room while the cleaning crew worked upstairs. 3 hours of watching tutorials, downloading free software, crafting something that looked exactly like Lumiere's wine menu QR code, but led somewhere completely different. I created a web page. Simple, bare bones, no fancy design, just text and images. Evidence. Every piece of information I could remember about Laurent's operation, every name Camilla had mentioned, every photograph I'd ever glimpsed being passed between men at private tables. I typed out Camilla's story, anonymous but detailed. I listed dates, times, descriptions of the clients I'd seen Laurent meet with in his office. I didn't have proof, not really. Just observations and suspicions and Camilla's testimony. But it was something. It was a start. Then I linked it to a QR code that looked identical to our wine menu code. The same layout, the same border, the same small restaurant logo in the corner. You'd have to look very carefully to notice the slight difference in the pixel pattern. Most people wouldn't bother. They'd just scan it expecting to see wine selections and instead get redirected to my web page. It was a terrible plan. It would probably fail. But maybe, just maybe, someone would scan that code. Someone with more power than me. Someone who could actually do something about Laurent and his network of predators. Someone like the man from Table 7. I'd noticed how carefully he'd watched everything, how his eyes tracked movement and cataloged details. He was dangerous, clearly. Criminal, almost certainly. But there'd been something in the way he'd looked at those photographs. Something cold and calculating, yes, but also something that might have been discussed. Maybe he'd help, maybe he wouldn't. But I was out of options and running out of time. I printed the new QR code on the office printer when no one was looking, a small sticker I could place over the real wine menu code. Then I went home, took the pregnancy test I'd been avoiding, watched the 2 pink lines appear, and cried myself to sleep on my bathroom floor. The next day, I came to work early. I placed my fake QR code stickers on every wine list in the private rooms, including Table 7's alcove. Then I waited. The man came back exactly 1 week later. Same table, same expensive suit, same cold eyes that seemed to see everything. This time he was alone. No entourage, just him and a laptop and a single glass of whiskey he didn't touch. I served him personally, my heart hammering so hard I was certain he could hear it. He ordered the prix-fixe menu without looking at me, his attention on his screen. I set down the wine list, the one with my fake code, and retreated to a respectful distance. And then I watched as he pulled out his phone, scanned the QR code almost absently, and went very, very still. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. He read my webpage. I could see it in the way his eyes moved, tracking left to right, scrolling down. His expression never changed. He could have been reading the weather forecast for all the emotion he showed. Then he looked up and met my gaze directly, and I saw recognition in his eyes. Not surprise. Recognition. Like he'd been waiting for exactly this. He stood, left cash on the table, far more than his meal cost, and walked out without a word. I didn't follow. I didn't know if I'd just saved Camilla or signed her death warrant. Or mine. But 3 hours later, just as we were closing, Laurent's driver burst through the front door, his face pale with panic. Monsieur Laurent needs everyone to leave immediately. There's been an incident. The restaurant is closing early. An incident. Such a polite word for whatever catastrophe was unfolding upstairs. Camilla grabbed my hand as we were herded out, her fingers ice cold. "What did you do?" she whispered, but there was something like hope in her voice. "I have no idea," I admitted. "We found out the next morning. Laurent had been arrested. So had 4 of his clients. The charges were extensive: trafficking, racketeering, sexual exploitation, money laundering. The evidence had come from an anonymous tip, incredibly detailed, with documentation that shouldn't have existed. The restaurant closed permanently. 23 women came forward with stories similar to Camilla's. The investigation expanded, revealing a network that stretched across 3 states and involved dozens of men in positions of power. And through it all, no one mentioned a QR code or a makeshift webpage or a desperate waitress who'd been stupid enough to hope. No one except the man who came to my apartment door exactly 2 weeks after Laurent's arrest. The man from table 7. The man whose storm-gray eyes looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "You have no idea what you started," he said. His voice that same gravel and velvet combination that made something low in my stomach tighten, despite my fear. Laurent's organization was small-time, but the men he catered to, the clients who used his service, they're connected to something much bigger. And now they know someone's watching. Someone who's clever enough to hack their entire operation. "I didn't hack anything," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I just made a website." "You exposed them," he corrected. "You made them vulnerable." And men like that, when they feel vulnerable, they eliminate threats. He paused, his gaze dropping briefly to my stomach, which was still flat but somehow seemed more obvious now that I knew. All threats. The implication hung in the air between us. "Are you here to eliminate me?" "No," he said simply. "I'm here to offer you a choice." I didn't invite him inside, but he walked in anyway, moving past me with the kind of confidence that came from never being refused entrance anywhere. My apartment, with its secondhand furniture and water-stained ceiling, suddenly felt even more cramped with him in it. He filled the space not with physical size, but with presence, with the coiled energy of someone accustomed to control. "Nice place," he said, and I couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic. "I can't afford better," I replied flatly, closing the door but leaving the chain unlatched. An illusion of safety. Nothing more. If he wanted to hurt me, a flimsy chain wouldn't stop him. "You said I have a choice. What kind of choice?" He turned to face me, and up close, in the harsh fluorescent light of my kitchen, I could see details I'd missed at the restaurant. The faint scar that ran along his left eyebrow. The way his jaw clenched and unclenched. A tiny tell of tension beneath his controlled exterior The tattoo that peeked from his collar, black ink forming shapes I couldn't quite make out. "My name is Silas Thorne," he said, and I realized he'd never actually introduced himself before. "I control most of the shipping that moves through New York's ports, legal and otherwise." "So you're a criminal," I said, because there was no point in pretending otherwise. "I prefer businessman," he replied with a slight smile. "But yes, if we're being honest, I operate outside the law. I traffic in information, in influence, in the gray areas where legal and illegal blur together." "And you're telling me this why?" "Because you need to understand what you're dealing with. Laurent's clients, the men in those photographs you documented so carefully, they're connected to various organizations throughout the city. Some are my competitors. Some are my enemies. Some," he paused, "are people I've been trying to take down for years. So you used my website." Understanding dawned slowly. "You took the information I gathered and weaponized it." "I made sure it reached the right people," he corrected. "People who could act on it. Your evidence was good, but it needed context, corroboration, legal maneuvering. I provided that." "Why?" I demanded. "Why would you help trafficking victims? That doesn't exactly fit with being a crime boss." Something dark crossed his face, there and gone so quickly I almost missed it. "I have my reasons. Suffice to say, I don't approve of Laurent's particular business model. Men who exploit vulnerable women are weak, parasites. They give the rest of us a bad name." "How noble of you," I said sarcastically. "I never claimed to be noble," he replied. "I claim to be useful. Which brings me to your choice. Laurent's associates know someone exposed them. They're looking for that someone. Eventually, they'll figure out it was you. They'll come for you, and they won't be gentle about it." The fear I'd been suppressing for 2 weeks came rushing back. "So what are my options? Run and hide? Change my identity?" "You could try," Silas said. "But they have resources, time, patience. They'd find you eventually, especially once the baby is born. Children leave paper trails, birth certificates, medical records, school enrollment." My hand moved instinctively to my stomach, protective even though there was nothing to feel yet. "How did you know?" "I noticed details," he said simply. "The way you moved at the restaurant, the nausea you tried to hide, the vitamins in your purse. It wasn't difficult to deduce." He paused. "Is the father in the picture?" "No," I said shortly. "He's gone. Not that it's any of your business." "It becomes my business if I'm offering to protect you." He moved closer, not threatening, just closing the distance between us. "Your other option is to accept my help. I can make you disappear, legally. New identity, new location, financial security. You and your child would be safe." "In exchange for what?" "Because there was always an exchange. Men like Silas Thorne didn't offer protection out of the goodness of their hearts." "Nothing," he said, and I almost laughed at the absurdity. "I'm not asking you to work for me or spy for me or owe me some future favor. I'm offering you safety because you did something brave and stupid and surprisingly effective. You reminded me that there are still people in this city who care about something other than their own survival." I studied his face, looking for the lie, the hidden agenda. But all I saw was a strange kind of honesty, brutal and uncomfortable. He meant it. He was offering to help me with no strings attached, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd demanded payment. "I don't want to disappear," I said finally. "I don't want to spend my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if they found me. I don't want my child growing up afraid." "Then what do you want?" "I want them stopped," I said, and the ferocity in my own voice surprised me. "All of them. Laurent was just one piece. You said it yourself. There's a whole network. Other girls like Camilla, trapped and exploited and disposed of when they're no longer useful. I want that network destroyed. Silas was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching mine. That's a war, he said finally, not a rescue operation. A war against some of the most powerful people in this city. It would take months, maybe years. It would be dangerous, bloody, and there's no guarantee we'd win. You started this, he said. That webpage, that evidence, you declared war whether you meant to or not. The question is whether you're willing to see it through. He leaned against my kitchen counter, casual despite the gravity of what he was saying. I can fight that war. I have the resources, the connections, the ruthlessness required. But I'd be doing it blind without inside information, without understanding how Laurent's network actually operated from the victim's perspective. You want me to help you. Understanding clicked into place. You want access to what I know, what Camilla knows, how the operation worked from our side. I want, Silas said carefully, to give you a choice in how your story ends. You can disappear and be safe, but powerless. Or you can stay and fight, knowing you might lose, but at least you tried to burn down the system that nearly destroyed your friend. It wasn't really a choice. Not for me, because I'd spent too many years being invisible, serving people who didn't see me, accepting that the world was unfair, and there was nothing I could do about it. And then I'd created that web page, taken that tiny act of defiance, and for the first time in my life, I'd actually changed something. I couldn't go back to being invisible now. What would it involve? I asked. This war of yours. Silas straightened, and I saw something that might have been respect flicker across his features. First, we document everything. Every name, every face, every transaction you remember from your time at Lumiere. Then we cross-reference it with my intelligence, build a complete picture of the network. After that, we systematically dismantle it, expose the clients, shut down the operations, destroy their ability to hurt anyone else. And the girls they're still trafficking? The ones who haven't gotten out yet? We get them out, he said simply. Extract them, provide them with resources, help them disappear or testify, whatever they choose. This isn't about vengeance. It's about cutting off the supply chain, making it unprofitable and too dangerous to continue. It sounded too good to be true, too clean. Why do you really care about this? I demanded. And don't give me that line about bad for business. There's something personal here. I can see it. For the first time, Silas's careful control slipped. His jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists before he deliberately relaxed them. My sister, he said, each word carefully measured. 15 years ago. Different city, different organization, but the same system. They found her after 3 months. She was alive, technically. But what they did to her... He stopped, and the silence was more eloquent than any description. She never recovered. Died by suicide 2 years later. The raw pain in his voice was unexpected, human in a way I hadn't anticipated. I'm sorry, I said inadequately. Don't be sorry, he replied. Be smart. Understand what you're getting into. These aren't just criminals. They're businessmen with lawyers and political connections. They'll fight back. They'll target you specifically once they realize you're working with me. Your life will become exponentially more dangerous. My life is already dangerous, I pointed out. You said they're looking for me anyway. At least this way I'm doing something about it instead of just hiding. There's a difference between passive danger and actively painting a target on your back. Then I guess I'd better learn to shoot, I said, and I saw surprise flicker across his face before something that might have been admiration replaced it. You're serious, completely. I moved closer to him, matching his intensity. I watched my best friend get destroyed by men who thought they could use her and throw her away. I lived 3 years in that restaurant, invisible and powerless, while Laurent and people like him preyed on women who had no other options. I'm done being powerless. So yes, I'm serious. I want to help you burn it all down. Silas studied me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling sense that he was seeing past my bravado to the fear underneath, the exhaustion, the desperate hope that maybe I could turn my stupid, impulsive act of rebellion into something that actually mattered. "All right," he said finally, "but we do this my way. You follow my instructions, you don't take unnecessary risks, and you tell me immediately if you feel unsafe or compromised. This isn't about being a hero. It's about being smart and strategic." "Fine," I agreed. "But I have conditions too." His eyebrow rose. "You're negotiating with me?" "You said this was a choice. That means I get to set terms." I held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "First, Camilla and any other girls we rescue, they get real help. Not just money and a bus ticket, actual support, therapy, legal aid, whatever they need. Second, I stay involved in decisions about the operation. You don't shut me out because you decide it's too dangerous. Third, my baby is off limits. No using my pregnancy as leverage or making decisions for me based on the fact that I'm going to be a mother." "Is that all?" There was amusement in his voice now, subtle, but definitely there. "No. Fourth, when this is over, assuming we survive, you leave me alone. No debts, no favors owed, no strings attached. We're even, and I go back to my life. Your life as an unemployed waitress with a target on her back." He shook his head. "That's not realistic. Then I'll find a new life," I said firmly. "But it will be my life, my choice, not something you orchestrated because you feel responsible for me." Silas was quiet for a moment, and I could see him weighing my terms, calculating whether they were acceptable. Finally, he extended his hand. "Deal. But I reserve the right to renegotiate Term 4 when the time comes." "Why?" "Because," he said, his gray eyes holding mine, "I have a feeling that by the time this is over, leaving you alone will be the last thing either of us wants." I took his hand, his palm warm and calloused against mine, and felt the strange electricity of that touch. This was insane. I was making a deal with a crime boss to wage war against a human trafficking network while pregnant and unemployed. Nothing about this was rational or safe, or remotely resembling a good decision. But I'd spent my whole life making safe decisions, practical choices, and where had it gotten me? Alone, broke, invisible. At least this way, if I was going to crash and burn, I'd do it while fighting for something that mattered. "When do we start?" I asked. "Now," Silas replied. "Pack a bag. You're coming with me." "Where?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find you while we plan our next move." He released my hand and moved toward the door. "And Ren, thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me why I started this in the first place," he said. "Why fighting monsters matters, even when you become one yourself in the process." Silas's definition of somewhere safe turned out to be a brownstone in Brooklyn, tucked away on a tree-lined street that looked like it belonged in a movie about old money and quiet scandal. The building was 4 stories of red brick and elegant iron railings, with window boxes that someone actually maintained, and a front door painted glossy black. "This is yours?" I asked, as he unlocked the door with an actual key. No fancy electronic systems, just old-fashioned metal and tumblers. "It's off the books," he replied, which wasn't really an answer. "No utilities in my name, no property records linking it to me. As far as anyone knows, it's owned by a shell corporation that doesn't exist." He pushed the door open and gestured for me to enter. "It's clean, secure, and most importantly, unknown. You'll be safe here." The interior matched the exterior's elegance, All hardwood floors and crown molding, furniture that managed to be both expensive and comfortable. Art on the walls that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. A kitchen with marble countertops and appliances I didn't know how to use. It was beautiful and impersonal, like a very expensive hotel suite. "How many safe houses do you have?" I asked, setting down my single duffel bag, which looked pathetic against all this carefully curated wealth. "Enough." Silas moved through the space with familiar ease, checking windows and doors with the automatic precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "The guest bedroom is upstairs, second door on the left. There's food in the kitchen, though we'll need to stock up on things you can actually eat given your condition. Make yourself comfortable." "My condition," I repeated. "You mean my pregnancy? You can say the word." He turned to look at me, and something in his expression shifted, became more guarded. "Your pregnancy. Yes. How far along are you?" "About 8 weeks." I hadn't meant to tell him, but the words came out anyway. "I just found out for sure, before everything with Laurent exploded." "And the father?" "Left before I knew," I said shortly. Not that I'd want him involved anyway. He was a mistake. The relationship was a mistake. And the only good thing coming out of it is this baby. Silas nodded slowly, as if processing information and filing it away. "You'll need to see a doctor. Regular prenatal care. I'll arrange for someone discreet." "I can arrange my own medical care." "With what money?" He wasn't being cruel, just practical. "You're unemployed, likely uninsured and in hiding. Let me help." The ugly truth was that he was right. I had maybe $700 in my checking account. No health insurance since Lumiere had only offered it to full-time employees and I'd been classified as part-time, despite working 50 hours a week. I couldn't afford prenatal care. Couldn't afford the vitamins I was supposed to be taking. Couldn't afford any of this. "Fine," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Silas moved to the kitchen and started pulling out food, assembling what looked like the components of a meal. "We have work to do, starting with everything you remember about Laurent's operation." We spent the next 3 hours at his dining table, me talking and him listening with absolute focus, occasionally asking questions that made me realize how much I'd seen without fully understanding. He took notes in a leather-bound journal, his handwriting surprisingly neat, and when I described the various men I'd seen meeting with Laurent, he'd sometimes pull out his phone and show me photographs. "Him?" he'd ask, and I'd nod or shake my head, and he'd make another notation. By the time we finished, I was exhausted, emotionally drained from reliving months of observations and suspicions I'd tried to ignore. Silas made me eat chicken and vegetables that he'd cooked himself, and I was surprised to discover he was actually good at it. Former line cook? I guessed, watching him plate the food with casual expertise. Something like that. He set a plate in front of me. "Eat. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." He wasn't wrong. I'd been living on whatever the kitchen at Lumiere would give me, and cheap takeout I could barely afford. Real, home-cooked food felt like luxury. "This is good," I admitted around a mouthful of chicken. "My mother insisted we learn to cook," Silas said, sitting across from me with his own plate. "Said no son of hers would be helpless in a kitchen. She was Italian, very traditional in some ways, very progressive in others. Food was love, in her worldview. The best way to show care." It was the first personal detail he'd volunteered, and I found myself curious. "Was?" "Cancer, 10 years ago." He said it matter-of-factly, but I could hear the old pain underneath. "After my sister. After what happened to her, it broke something in my mother. She blamed herself. Thought if she'd been more watchful, more protective, she could have prevented it. The guilt ate her alive, literally." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Life is cruel to women," Silas said quietly. It takes and takes until there's nothing left. My sister, my mother, the girls Laurent trapped. The system is designed to consume you, which is why we're going to dismantle it piece by piece. We cleaned up together, moving around the kitchen in a surprisingly comfortable silence. He showed me how to use the security system, gave me codes and keys, explained that the panic button in every room would bring help within 5 minutes. Help meaning your people, I clarified. Meaning me, he corrected. I'm the only one who knows you're here. The fewer people involved, the safer you are. That should have been concerning. Being alone with him, dependent on him, isolated from everyone I knew. But strangely, I felt safer than I had in months. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the pregnancy hormones. Or maybe it was something in the way Silas looked at me, not with pity or condescension, but with respect. Like I was an equal partner in this insane plan, rather than a victim to be protected. I should let you sleep, he said, checking his watch. It was nearly 10 p.m. Tomorrow we'll start the real work. Building cases, gathering evidence, identifying targets. It'll be tedious. Tedious sounds safe, I said. I'll take tedious. He smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed his face. Made him look younger, less hardened. Get some rest. If you need anything, I'm in the master bedroom, 3rd floor. Don't hesitate to wake me. I went upstairs, found the guest room he'd indicated. It was beautiful, decorated in soft blues and grays, with a bed that looked like a cloud and windows that overlooked the quiet street. There were clothes in the closet, various sizes, and I realized he must have safe houses like this scattered throughout the city, always ready for whoever needed them. I showered in the attached bathroom, marveling at the water pressure and the array of expensive toiletries. Put on one of the nightgowns I found in the dresser drawer. Climbed into bed and expected to lie awake for hours, my mind racing with everything that had happened. Instead, I fell asleep almost immediately. More deeply than I had in months. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, I was disoriented. Couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten here. Then memory returned, and with it, the surreal reality of my situation. I was living in a safe house owned by a crime boss, preparing to wage war against a human trafficking network, while pregnant and unemployed. My life had become unrecognizable. I dressed in clothes from the closet, jeans and a soft sweater that fit surprisingly well, and went downstairs. Found Silas in the kitchen, already dressed in dark slacks and a button-down shirt, looking like he'd been awake for hours. He was reading something on his laptop, his expression focused and slightly grim. "Morning," I said, pouring myself decaf coffee from the pot he'd made. "You look unhappy." 3 more girls went missing last night, he said without preamble. From clubs throughout the city, all of them fit Laurent's profile: immigrants, vulnerable, desperate. His organization might be dismantled, but the demand didn't disappear. Someone's stepping in to fill the void. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Already? Nature abhors a vacuum, Silas said. We took out one supplier, so another one emerges. That's the problem with only attacking one part of the network. Unless we destroy the whole system, new predators will always step in. So what do? We accelerate our timeline. He closed his laptop and looked at me directly. I was planning to take months, build airtight cases, work through legal channels where possible. But we don't have months. Every day we wait, more girls disappear. So we go after the buyers instead. The buyers? Laurent's clients, the men who created the demand in the first place. We expose them, destroy their reputations, make it so toxic that no one wants to risk being associated with trafficking. He pulled up a list on his phone, dozens of names with photographs attached. These are the men you documented: lawyers, businessmen, politicians, even a few clergy. Men with everything to lose. I scanned the list, recognizing faces from the restaurant. Men who'd left generous tips and smiled pleasantly and treated me like furniture. How do we expose them? We give them a choice, Silas said with a cold smile. Come forward voluntarily, confess their involvement, and face justice. Or we release everything: photos, financial records, testimony from the women they exploited, and let the court of public opinion destroy them. Most of them won't confess, I predicted. No, he agreed, but a few will, and their confessions will corroborate the evidence against the others. It creates a cascade effect. Once one domino falls, the others have no choice but to follow. It was ruthless, strategic, exactly the kind of plan that might actually work. When do we start? This afternoon. We're meeting with the first target, a hedge fund manager named Richard Kessler. He was one of Laurent's regular clients, spent a fortune on his services. But he's also got a family, a reputation, everything to lose if this becomes public. And you think he'll cooperate? I think he'll be smart enough to see that cooperation is his only option. Silas stood, gathering his things. We leave in an hour. Wear something professional, business casual. We need to look legitimate. I went back upstairs, my mind racing. This was real. We were actually doing this. And despite the fear, despite the insanity of it all, I felt something that might have been excitement. Purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. The clothes in the closet included several business-appropriate outfits, and I chose a simple charcoal dress with a blazer. Professional, but not too formal. I did my makeup carefully, making myself look confident and composed even though my hands were shaking. When I came back downstairs, Silas looked me over with an appraising eye. Good. You look trustworthy, innocent, like someone a jury would believe. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, and a strategic advantage. He held out a folder. This is everything we have on Kessler. Memorize it. When we confront him, you need to know the details better than he does. Make him understand that we have everything, that there's no point in lying. I spent the car ride to Manhattan reading and rereading the file. Richard Kessler, 42, married with 3 children. Harvard MBA, managed a fund worth $2 billion. Multiple board positions, donated generously to charity. On paper, he was a pillar of the community. But the photographs told a different story. Kessler with girls barely out of their teens, in hotel rooms and private clubs. Financial transfers to shell companies that led back to Laurent. Text messages that made me physically ill to read, treating human beings like commodities to be purchased and discarded. How did you get all this? I asked Silas. I have resources, was all he said. We met Kessler in his office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. He'd agreed to see us under the pretense of discussing a potential investment. When we walked in, he was all smiles and confidence, shaking Silas's hand and barely glancing at me. Mr. Thorne, pleased to meet you. And this is? My associate, Silas said smoothly. She'll be observing. We sat, and Silas wasted no time. He placed a photograph on Kessler's desk, one of the man with a girl who couldn't have been more than 19, his hand on her bare thigh, his expression predatory. The blood drained from Kessler's face. I believe you recognize this, Silas said pleasantly, along with the other 47 photographs we have, and the financial records, and the testimony from 6 different women describing your preferences in detail. Kessler's mouth opened and closed. This is blackmail. No, I said, speaking for the first time, and his attention snapped to me. This is justice. Those girls you hurt, they have names, families, dreams. You treated them like objects, and now you're going to answer for it. "Who the hell are you?" Kessler demanded. "Someone who watched you at Lumiere," I replied. "Someone who served you food and wine while you conducted your business. Someone who's going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are." The color that had left his face came back in an angry rush. "You can't prove anything." Silas smiled. "We can prove everything. The question is whether you cooperate now, voluntarily, or whether we destroy you publicly. Your choice." We left him there, sweating and panicking, with 24 hours to decide. As we walked back to the car, I realized I was shaking, but not from fear, from satisfaction, from the fierce joy of finally fighting back. "You were good in there," Silas said as he started the engine. "Natural, believable." I meant every word. I know, that's what made it effective. He pulled into traffic, and I saw him glance at me with something that might have been approval. "We make a good team. Don't get used to it," I said. "Remember, when this is over, you leave me alone." "We'll see," was all he said, and I didn't have the energy to argue. Kessler confessed. Not to the police, not initially, but to his lawyer, who then contacted the district attorney's office with a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. Within 48 hours, his testimony had implicated 7 other men, and the investigation was expanding faster than anyone had anticipated. But success came with complications. "They know someone's coordinating this," Silas said 3 weeks later, pacing his office in a building I'd learned was the legitimate front for his less legal operations. Import, export, technically true, though what was being imported and exported wasn't always documented. Kessler's lawyer is smart. He's noticed that the evidence against his client is too complete, too organized. Someone had access to information that shouldn't exist. I was sitting in the leather chair across from his desk, my hand resting on my stomach, which had finally started to show a slight curve. 13 weeks now, safely into the 2nd trimester, though nothing about my life felt particularly safe. So what does that mean for us? It means they're looking for the source, which means they're looking for you, even if they don't know your name yet. He stopped pacing and looked at me. "We need to move you. This safe house is compromised." "How?" "One of my people was questioned yesterday. Someone approached him asking about connections to Laurent's organization, people who might have grudges or information. He didn't talk, but the fact that they're asking questions means they're narrowing their search." Silas moved to the window, looking out at the city spread below us. I underestimated how quickly they'd organize a counterattack. "You keep saying they," I pointed out. "Who specifically are we talking about?" He turned back to me. "Do you really want to know? Some things, once you know them, you can't unknow. Names have power. They make things real in ways that abstractions don't." "I want to know what I'm fighting," I said firmly. "Who wants me dead?" Silas was quiet for a moment, weighing something internal. Then he pulled out his phone and brought up a photograph. "Victor Marchetti. He runs the largest escort service in the tri-state area. Supplies girls to men like Kessler. Laurent was small-time compared to him." The man in the photograph looked ordinary. Mid-50s, slight build, thinning hair. He could have been anyone's accountant or dentist, but his eyes were cold, empty in a way that made my skin crawl. "He's been operating for 20 years, Silas continued, protected by lawyers and corrupt officials, and the simple fact that his clients are too powerful to touch. He's the apex predator in this ecosystem, and we've just declared war on him." "Good," I said and meant it. "Someone should have done it years ago. Someone tried." Silas's voice was flat. 3 years ago, an FBI agent started building a case against Marchetti. She disappeared before she could testify. They found her body in the Hudson 6 months later. The implication hung heavy between us. And you think he'll do the same to me? I think he'll try. Which is why you need better protection. Not just safe houses and security systems. Real, physical protection. People who can fight back if someone comes for you. You mean bodyguards. I mean soldiers, he corrected. People loyal to me. Willing to kill to keep you safe. It means giving up any pretense of normal life, of privacy. It means accepting that you're a target and living accordingly. I looked down at my hands, at the slight tremor I couldn't quite control. I'm scared, I admitted. I've been trying not to be, trying to stay focused on the mission, but I'm terrified. For me, for the baby, for what happens if we lose. Silas moved around the desk and sat in the chair next to mine, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that reminded me of cedar and smoke. Fear is good, he said quietly. Fear keeps you alert, careful. It's the people who aren't scared that get killed, the ones who think they're invincible. Are you scared? I asked, looking up at him. Constantly. There was no bravado in his admission, just honesty. Every decision I make could get someone killed. Every plan could fail. Every day I wake up knowing that my empire is built on violence and could collapse just as violently. Yes, I'm scared. But I don't let it paralyze me. How? I choose what I'm fighting for and I hold on to that. Purpose beats fear every time. His gray eyes held mine. You wanted to burn down the system that hurt your friend. That purpose has carried you this far. Don't lose it now. He was right. I'd come too far, risked too much to back down because I was frightened. Okay, I said. What do you need me to do? First, you move to my primary residence. It's more secure, and I can watch over you personally. Second, you work with my intelligence team to document everything you remember about every interaction you ever had at Lumiere. Every face, every name, every conversation. We build a database so complete that even if something happens to you, the information survives. Third, he hesitated. Third, you consider whether you want to continue being actively involved in the takedown, or whether you want to step back and let my people handle it from here. Is that what you want? I challenged. For me to step back? What I want is irrelevant. This is your choice, your life. But yes, part of me wants you somewhere safe, protected, out of the line of fire. The other part. He trailed off, and something in his expression shifted, became more vulnerable. The other part recognizes that you're the most effective weapon we have. You understand this world in ways I never could. Your perspective, your insights. They've been invaluable. Losing that would weaken our position significantly. So you're saying I should stay involved because I'm useful, I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. I'm saying you should stay involved because you're extraordinary, Silas corrected. Because in a world of people motivated by fear or greed or survival, you're motivated by something rarer. Justice. Real justice. Not the legal kind, but the kind that actually protects the vulnerable. That's dangerous to people like Marchetti. More dangerous than any evidence or testimony. Because you make others believe it's possible to fight back. I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever called me extraordinary before. Ordinary, forgettable, invisible. Those were the words that defined me. The waitress who brought the food and cleared the plates and vanished from memory the moment I left the room. I'll stay involved, I said finally. But I need you to promise me something. What? If something happens to me, if Marchetti or his people find me and I don't survive, you make sure the baby is safe. You find good people to raise them. People who love them and protect them and never tell them their mother was stupid enough to start a war she couldn't finish. Silas's expression hardened. Nothing's going to happen to you. You can't promise that. Watch me. There was steel in his voice now, absolute conviction. You're under my protection, Ren. That means I will move heaven and earth to keep you safe. Marchetti wants to get to you. He'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, I'm much harder to kill than an FBI agent working alone. Why? The question burst out before I could stop it. Why do you care so much? Is this really just about your sister? About past trauma? Or is there something else? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze searching mine. Then he reached out and took my hand, his fingers warm and calloused against my palm. In my world, he said slowly, everyone wants something from me. Power, money, protection, revenge. Everyone has an angle, a plan, a reason to pretend loyalty while waiting for a chance to betray me. It's exhausting, being surrounded by people who see you as a tool, or a threat, or a stepping stone to what they really want. I want something from you too, I pointed out. Help destroying Marchetti's network. Yes, he agreed. But you didn't come to me asking for help. You tried to do it yourself, with nothing but a website and a desperate hope that someone would notice. You risked everything for someone else, with no guarantee of reward or recognition. That's... He paused, seeming to struggle for words. That's so rare in my life that I can't help but treasure it. You remind me that goodness exists, that there are still people worth protecting. And I find myself wanting to protect you specifically, not because you're useful or strategic, but because the world needs more people like you and fewer people like me. My throat felt tight. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. He smiled, wry and self-aware. Welcome to my life, sad and complicated, with occasional moments of extreme violence. Sounds terrible. It is, he agreed, but it's also mine, and I've made peace with what I am. A monster, yes, but one who occasionally does monstrous things to even worse monsters. It's not redemption, not exactly, but it's something. I squeezed his hand. You're not a monster. You're just a man who's seen too much darkness and adapted to survive in it. That's different. Semantics. No, I insisted. Monsters don't sit in safe houses cooking dinner for pregnant women. They don't arrange medical care or worry about whether their protection is invasive. They don't give people choices when they could just take control. You might do monstrous things, but you're not a monster. Not to me. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in his carefully maintained armor. For just a moment, I saw past the crime boss to the man underneath, lonely and tired and carrying burdens I couldn't imagine. Thank you, he said quietly, for seeing me as human. It's been a while since anyone did. We sat like that for a moment, hands linked, the silence comfortable despite everything. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He checked it and swore under his breath. What is it? Camilla, he said. She's missing, disappeared from the shelter where we'd placed her. No signs of a struggle, but her things are gone, and no one's seen her since yesterday morning. Ice flooded my veins. Marchetti? Maybe. Or she got spooked and ran. Or... He stood, already moving toward the door. Stay here. I'm going to check her last known location, see if there's any indication of what happened. I'm coming with you. Ren... She's my friend, I said firmly, standing to follow him. If she's in trouble, if Marchetti has her, I need to be there. I can't just sit here waiting while you search. Silas looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced him. Fine, but you stay in the car. You don't engage with anyone suspicious, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. We drove to Queens, to the shelter where Camilla had been staying. It was a converted brownstone, similar to Silas's safe house, but shabbier, clearly operating on a tight budget. The director, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, confirmed that Camilla had left voluntarily, taken all her possessions with her. "Did she say where she was going?" Silas asked. "No, just that she couldn't stay anymore. That she'd brought danger here and needed to leave before anyone else got hurt." The director looked worried. She seemed frightened but determined. I tried to talk her into staying, but she said some debts couldn't be escaped by hiding. My stomach dropped. She went back to Marchetti. "It's possible," Silas agreed grimly. "If he threatened her family back in Guatemala, if he convinced her that cooperating was the only way to keep them safe, she might have felt she had no choice. We have to find her. We will." He thanked the director and led me back to the car. "But first, I need to make some calls. If Camilla's back in Marchetti's custody, getting her out will require careful planning. We can't just storm in and extract her. That would endanger everyone else he's holding. So what do? We give Marchetti what he really wants," Silas said. "We give him you." "Absolutely not." I said it firmly, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. "You are not using me as bait." Silas was standing by the window of his penthouse, the one he'd moved me to 2 days ago after confirming that Marchetti had indeed reclaimed Camilla. The view overlooked the Hudson River, glittering in the afternoon sun like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold, and indifferent to the nightmare unfolding around us. "It's not bait," he corrected without turning around. "It's strategy. Marchetti wants to silence you because you're the source of his problems. If we offer you up, he'll take the meeting. And at that meeting, we'll have him. Dead or arrested. Does it matter?" He finally looked at me. "Either way, he's stopped. His organization collapses. The girls he's trafficking go free, including Camilla. And I end up dead in the process," I said. "Forgive me for not being enthusiastic about that plan." "You won't die." His voice was flat, certain. "I'll have 20 men in position. Snipers, close protection, extraction teams. The moment Marchetti makes a move against you, we eliminate the threat. You'll be wearing body armor, you'll have a weapon, and most importantly, you'll have me. Nothing is going to happen to you. You can't guarantee that. I can." He moved closer, his gray eyes intense. "I've spent 3 weeks planning this operation. Every contingency, every possible scenario. I've wargamed it against my best strategists. The odds of success are 87%. What about the other 13%? Statistically insignificant." But the way he said it, the slight hesitation, told me he was lying. Those 13% haunted him, kept him awake at night, running through scenarios trying to find the flaw in his plan. I sat down on the leather couch, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. 15 weeks now, the bump more pronounced, impossible to hide under loose clothing. "I'm pregnant," I said quietly. "If something goes wrong, if I die, you're not just killing me. You're killing my baby. An innocent life that has nothing to do with any of this." Silas flinched, the first crack in his composure I'd seen in days. "I know. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't been calculating exactly that cost every time I revise this plan? Then explain to me why this is the only option. There has to be another way to get to Marchetti without putting me directly in his crosshairs." He sat down across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I've been fighting men like Marchetti for 15 years. I know how they think, how they operate. They survive by being paranoid, by trusting no one, by eliminating threats before they become problems. Marchetti won't surface for anything less than the opportunity to end his biggest threat permanently. That's you. Your testimony, your knowledge, your willingness to fight. You're the key to unraveling everything he's built. Take you out, and he thinks he's safe again. So I'm martyring myself for the cause." "No," Silas said firmly. You're trusting me to keep you alive while we take down someone who destroys lives for profit. There's a difference. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that his planning was perfect, that his people were skilled enough, that the universe owed me a break after everything I'd been through. But I'd learned the hard way that the universe didn't operate on fairness. It operated on chaos and chance, and the cruelty of powerful men who thought they were untouchable. "Tell me about the plan," I said finally. "Every detail. I want to know exactly what I'm walking into." Over the next hour, Silas laid it out. The meeting would take place in a warehouse Marchetti controlled, ostensibly neutral ground but actually heavily surveilled and defended. I'd wear a wire so Silas's team could monitor everything. I'd be armed, though concealed enough that Marchetti wouldn't immediately perceive me as a threat. Silas would be nearby, close enough to intervene if things went wrong, but far enough away that Marchetti wouldn't suspect an ambush. The goal was simple: get Marchetti to incriminate himself on tape, provide enough evidence to bring formal charges, and hopefully locate where he was keeping Camilla and the other girls. If possible, we'd do it clean, with arrests and legal proceedings. If not, we do it messy, Silas finished. We eliminate Marchetti and his lieutenants, extract the victims, and disappear before anyone can connect it back to us. You mean murder them? I mean protect you, he corrected. And everyone else they'd hurt if we let them continue operating. Call it murder if you want. I call it justice that the legal system won't provide. He wasn't wrong. I'd seen how the system failed women like Camilla, like all the others trapped in Marchetti's web. Arrests that didn't stick, trials that went nowhere, victims who disappeared before they could testify. The law was supposed to protect us, but it was written by people who didn't understand what it was like to be vulnerable, exploited, powerless. When? I asked. 3 days, Silas said. Marchetti's people have agreed to the meet. They think I'm delivering you as a peace offering, buying my way back into his good graces by eliminating his problem. He's arrogant enough to believe it. And my role is to be the sacrificial lamb who isn't actually sacrificed. Your role is to be brave for 90 seconds while I keep you safe, he said. That's all. 90 seconds of facing your fear, and then it's over. We destroy him, we free the victims, and you get your life back. What life? I asked. Even if this works, even if we survive, I'm still pregnant and alone and unemployed. Laurent's gone. Marchetti will be gone. But the world that created them still exists. The demand that made their businesses profitable doesn't disappear just because we take out a few suppliers. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What if you didn't have to do it alone?" "What do you mean?" "After this is over, after Marchetti is handled, you'll need a safe place to have the baby. Resources, support. I can provide that. All of it. No strings. No obligations. Just let me help you." I studied his face, looking for the catch. "Why would you do that?" "Because," he said slowly, as if the words were difficult, "in the past 3 weeks, I've watched you face down men who could crush you without effort. I've seen you risk everything for someone else's safety. I've listened to you talk about your dreams for your child, the life you want to give them. And I've realized something terrifying." "What?" "I don't want you to leave," he admitted. "When this is over, when you've served your purpose and the debt is paid, I don't want you to walk away and disappear. I want you to stay, in my life, in my world, maybe even." He stopped, seemed to struggle with himself. "Maybe even in my home, permanently." My breath caught. "Are you asking me to—" "I'm not asking anything," he interrupted. "Not yet. First, we survive the meeting with Marchetti. Then we can talk about what comes after. But I needed you to know that when I say I'll keep you safe, it's not just strategic, it's personal. I care about you, Ren. More than I should. More than is smart. But undeniably. I didn't know what to say. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a struggling waitress with a secret pregnancy and an uncertain future. Now I was sitting in a penthouse with a man who commanded an empire, planning to take down a human trafficking ring, and listening to something that sounded dangerously like a declaration of feelings. "This is insane," I said finally. "Completely," Silas agreed. "Welcome to my world." The 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Weapons training, because Silas insisted I know how to use the gun I'd be carrying. Rehearsals of the meeting, practicing what to say, how to respond, when to signal if I needed extraction. Medical checkups to ensure the baby was healthy, that the stress wasn't affecting my pregnancy. And throughout it all, moments of surprising normalcy. Meals shared at his dining table, conversations about books and art, and anything except the looming confrontation. Quiet evenings where we'd sit together in comfortable silence, his hand sometimes finding mine, a connection forming that neither of us had planned for. On the night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I paced the guest room, running through scenarios, imagining all the ways this could go wrong. Finally, around 2 a.m., I gave up and went downstairs. Found Silas in his study, also awake, staring at blueprints of the warehouse spread across his desk. "Can't sleep either?" I asked from the doorway. He looked up, and in the dim light, he looked tired. Human, vulnerable in ways he never was during the day. Every time I close my eyes, I see that 13%. The scenarios where something goes wrong, where my plan fails, where you... He didn't finish the sentence. Where I die, I finished for him. Yes. He stood and moved toward me. I've sent men into danger before. Good men, loyal men, some of them died. I mourned them, felt responsible, but I accepted it as the cost of war. But the thought of you dying, of losing you because my plan wasn't perfect enough, it's unbearable. And I don't know why it's different with you, but it is. Because you see me as human, I said, not as a soldier or a tool or a strategic asset. You see me as a person with dreams and fears and a baby growing inside me who deserves a chance at life. I see you as essential, he corrected, as someone who makes my world less dark just by existing in it. And tomorrow, I'm asking you to risk that existence for something that might not even work. You're not asking, I reminded him. I'm choosing. I could say no. I could hide, disappear, let Marchetti win because I was too afraid to fight. But I'm not going to do that. Because every day Marchetti operates, more girls like Camilla suffer. Every day we wait, the debt of inaction grows. So yes, I'm scared. Terrified, actually. But I'm more angry than afraid, and that anger is going to carry me through tomorrow. Silas reached out and cupped my face in his hands, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. You're extraordinary, he said quietly. I hope you know that. Then he kissed me. Gentle at first, tentative, giving me every opportunity to pull away. But I didn't. I leaned into him, kissing him back, pouring all my fear and hope and desperate need for human connection into that contact. His arms came around me, holding me carefully, like I was something precious that might break. When we finally separated, we were both breathing hard. Tomorrow, he said, his forehead resting against mine. After we destroy Marchetti and free Camilla and end this nightmare, I'm going to ask you to stay, properly, with an offer you can consider without the pressure of imminent danger clouding your judgment. And what if I say no? Then I'll respect your choice and help you build whatever life you want, separately from mine, he said. But I'm hoping you'll say yes. Why? Because I've spent 15 years building an empire in the dark, he said. And you're the first light I've wanted to keep. The meeting with Marchetti happened at dawn, the warehouse district gray and cold and empty of witnesses. I wore the body armor Silas had insisted on, hidden under a loose jacket. The wire was taped to my skin, and the gun was heavy in my pocket, a reminder of how badly this could go. Silas walked me to the entrance, his hand on my back, steadying. 90 seconds, he reminded me. That's all. You go in, you get him talking, you confirm he has Camilla, and you get out. I'll handle the rest. What if he doesn't want to talk? Then the snipers take him down, and we move to extraction immediately, Silas said. But give him a chance to incriminate himself first. We want this airtight. He kissed me once more, hard and desperate, then stepped back. I'll be right here. Nothing is going to happen to you. I walked into the warehouse alone. Marchetti was waiting in the center, surrounded by 4 men with guns. He looked exactly like his photograph, ordinary and unremarkable, except for those empty eyes that promised violence. Behind him, I saw Camilla, bound to a chair, her face bruised but alive. Ren Aldridge, Marchetti said pleasantly, the little waitress who started a war. You've cost me a great deal of money. Good, I said, and I saw surprise flicker across his face. He'd expected fear, submission, not defiance. You deserve to lose everything. Brave words, he said, but ultimately meaningless. You're here because you've realized you can't win. You're here to negotiate your surrender. So let's talk terms. I'm not here to surrender, I said. I'm here to make sure you pay for what you did to Camilla and every other woman you've exploited. Marchetti laughed, and it was genuinely amused. You think you're the hero of this story. You're a pregnant waitress with delusions of grandeur. You have no power here. I have enough power to make you surface, I countered. Enough power to make you so paranoid that you took a meeting with the person who's been destroying your organization piece by piece. That's not powerless. That's terrifying to you. His smile faded. You're right. You are terrifying. Which is why I can't let you leave here alive. He nodded to one of his men who raised his gun. And in that moment, everything happened at once. The warehouse windows exploded inward as Silas's snipers took their shots. Marchetti's men dropped before they could fire. Silas himself burst through a side door, moving with lethal precision. And I pulled my own gun, aiming it at Marchetti's chest, my hands steady despite my racing heart. It's over, I said. Marchetti looked around at his fallen men, at the blood and chaos, at Silas advancing with murder in his eyes. Then he looked back at me and smiled. You think this ends anything? I'm one man. There are dozens more like me. Hundreds. An entire industry built on the suffering you're trying to stop. Kill me, arrest me, it doesn't matter. The system will replace me before my body's cold. Maybe, I agreed. But every system is built on individuals. Remove enough individuals, and the system collapses. You're just the first domino. Silas reached us, his gun trained on Marchetti. Final chance. Tell me where the other girls are. Tell me the names of your partners, or I end this my way. Marchetti said nothing. His silence was answer enough. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse. Marchetti fell, and just like that, it was over. We freed Camilla and found 12 other girls locked in rooms throughout the warehouse, got them medical attention, connected them with resources, started the long process of helping them rebuild. The evidence we gathered from Marchetti's computers led to 17 more arrests. The case made national news, though my name was never mentioned. As far as the public knew, it was an FBI operation that finally succeeded. 2 months later, I stood in Silas's penthouse, looking out at the city, my hand resting on my swollen belly. 23 weeks pregnant now, the baby active enough that I could feel definite kicks. Proof of life continuing despite everything. You're thinking too hard, Silas said from behind me. I'm thinking about the future, I admitted. About what kind of life I want for this baby. What kind of person I want to be. He wrapped his arms around me, careful of my stomach, his chin resting on my shoulder. And have you decided? I think so. I turned in his arms to face him. I want to stay. Here. With you. Not because I need protection or resources, but because somewhere in the middle of this nightmare, I fell in love with you. With the man who sees darkness but chooses to fight it anyway. With the person who gave me a choice when he could have taken control. With you, Silas, complicated and dangerous and surprisingly good at cooking. He smiled, genuine and warm, the expression transforming his face. I was hoping you'd say that, but, I continued, I have conditions. Of course you do. When the baby's born, we raise them in truth. No lies about what you do, what I did, how we met. Age-appropriate truth, but truth nonetheless. Second, I want to be involved in your operations that deal with trafficking and exploitation, not as bait or a victim, but as an equal partner. Third, we buy the restaurant. He blinked. What restaurant? Lumiere. It's been closed since Laurent's arrest. I want to buy it, renovate it, turn it into a legitimate business that employs immigrants legally, pays them fairly, and provides a safe working environment. A place that proves not everywhere in this industry is corrupt. Silas was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he laughed, full and rich, a sound I'd rarely heard from him. You want to buy a restaurant and staff it with the very population that traffickers usually exploit, as a middle finger to the entire system. Essentially, yes. It's brilliant, he said. Risky and complicated and probably going to cause headaches, but brilliant. I'll have my lawyers start the paperwork tomorrow. Really? Just like that? Just like that. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and my breath caught. I was going to wait until after the baby was born, do this properly with romance and planning. But you keep surprising me, making decisions faster than I can prepare for them. So here, now, with no witnesses, and no perfect moment, just us and the truth we've built together. He opened the box, revealing a ring. Simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant and understated. Ren Aldridge, will you marry me? Will you let me be the father your child deserves, and the partner you've been waiting for? Will you stay in my dark world and help me find light in it? I looked at the ring, at his face, at the future spreading out before us. It wouldn't be easy. We'd have enemies, complications, moments when we questioned every choice. But we'd also have each other, and purpose, and the knowledge that we'd fought for something that mattered. Yes, I said. Yes to all of it. He slipped the ring on my finger, and it fit perfectly, like everything else about this improbable relationship. I love you, he said. I don't say it easily or often, but I love you. I love you too, I replied, my dangerous, complicated, surprisingly romantic crime boss. 3 months later, I gave birth to a daughter. We named her Sophia, after Silas's sister. She had his gray eyes and my stubborn determination, and holding her for the first time, I understood exactly what I'd been fighting for all along. 6 months after that, we reopened Lumiere under new management. The staff was diverse, legal, and paid above industry standard. The private rooms became community spaces where immigrant families could celebrate milestones without fear. The restaurant became a symbol, proof that it was possible to operate ethically in an industry known for exploitation. And on the first anniversary of the day I'd serve Silas at table 7, I brought him coffee with a QR code on the saucer. He scanned it with amusement, expecting another menu or maybe a joke. Instead, it led to a single word. Thank you. For what? He asked. For seeing me, I said simply. for making me visible when I'd spent years disappearing, for choosing to be the kind of man who protects rather than preys, for giving me a life I never imagined possible. He pulled me close, Sophia sleeping between us, our imperfect, dangerous, extraordinary family. "The light recognizes the dark," he said, "and the dark learns to crave the light. That's all we ever were, all we ever needed to be. And in that moment, in that truth, I knew we'd won more than a war against traffickers. We'd won the chance to build something good in a world that tried to make us cruel. And that, more than anything, was worth fighting for."